All right. So without further ado, let's kick this thing off. I'm going to introduce Julio, who's going to introduce our first panel.
Yo, what up, y'all? What up, what up, what up? Thank you, Melody, Ant, Jeff, for having us. It's an honor to be here every year, of course, for the invitation and to be with all of y'all. Today, to kick things off, we're going to sort of talk about how the discovery of music has evolved, from the analog discovery of live show festivals to sort of like now the streaming services that we have, the SoundCloud, Spotify, and also the algorithms that sort of shape the whole landscape and our likes and basically everything that we expose ourselves to. I want to introduce two very key players in the A&R game. Tuma Basa, the director of urban music at YouTube Music. Please welcome him on stage. My brother Tunji Balogan, Executive VP of A&R RCA Records. So I guess just to start things off, in your guys' experience of discovery, going to shows to now the streaming platforms, how just in relative, how has things changed since these platforms sort of came about in these last few years?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's an honor to be here, and I want to thank everybody involved with putting this together. It's mad weird being up on a panel because usually, what's up, bro? Usually when I do panels, it's like in front of like aspiring artists and like young executives that want to get into the music industry, not like people that I grew up listening to or like my peers or like younger artists that I know through what I'm doing now. So I'm a little bit nervous, but hopefully we'll be all right. How have things changed? I would say I feel like things changed according to the way the fans discover and consume the music and the way that the artists are creating and releasing their music. So, I mean, I'm somebody who started as an artist. Some of you here know that, which is mad weird. And when I was making music, it was like, you would. First of all, it was so hard to even make a song. I don't really want to date myself, but like it was so difficult to like actually get in the studio and create a record and like get it recorded and mixed and make it sound professional. And then once you got the song finished, it was like, what the hell do you do with the song? Like, you had to put it on a CD and like run around and get it to people, So now I think the means of production have changed where it's like, a kid can really record a whole record on his laptop and, grab production. You don't need to know a producer. You can find beats, So the whole game has kind of changed in that respect. It's a little bit easier to create the records. And now, if you're a young artist, if you know the tools at your disposal, you can put your music in the same place that Drake and Adele's music goes, Whereas when I was a kid, it was like, how the hell do I get people to hear this music? There was nothing in place for that.
How many CDs are we printing? Were we bringing them? We're going to the
And then what are you going to do with the CDs?
Well, see, I was also once an artist, and none of you know that. And this is around 1992, 93 in Zimbabwe, right? And we put our music on, we got it on cassette. We got it to Radio 3 in Harare, which was the capital city. We lived in the second largest city, Bulawayo. It got played on Radio 3 during the local slot, like once or twice, but I was at church. The 3 spins we got happened to be exact times that my family would be at church, and people would tell me, but that was the furthest we could even imagine ever going, right? My name was B2Ma B, if anyone, there's no record.
I tried to find it. I couldn't find it. I looked for it before. I couldn't find it.
But what happens is this, but this is the difference, is hope. We had no hope. I had no hope. The other 2 guys, we had no hope. except for our local possibilities. And I moved to the States in 1994, and even in the States, I was living in Utah, Iowa, DC later on when I started working at BET 98. There was still no hope from there. Like, I remember getting into a discussion with a good friend of mine at the time. He was like, we're going to make Iowa the mecca of hip-hop. I was like, no, it's not going to happen. Because he had never been anywhere except for Minneapolis and St. Louis, right? And we had a lot of students from Chicago. But that was his world. That was, you know, what a music programmer like myself calls his sphere of influence. You know what I mean? So what happens is this, is now there's hope. Right now, because of open platforms like YouTube, because of measurable, especially hip hop is more measurable than it was before. It was a hidden market with the streets, you know what I mean? DVDs. No one was tracking mixtape sales or downloads on DatPiff or whatever, you know what I mean? Nobody was paying attention. No, when I say nobody, I'm talking about the people who write the checks. And they didn't speak that language. They don't speak that language or it's hot in the streets. They speak numbers and they speak money. Those are the two languages they speak. And now all of a sudden, these streaming platforms are translating hot in the streets to numbers, translating to money, something they can understand anywhere. You know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? So there was that gap. And what's happening is these streaming platforms, because of the way that they're set up, whether it was intended or not, it might be an unintended byproduct. They weren't trying to make hip-hop hot, or trying to give urban music its the due that it deserved, right? It's lame. Yeah, exactly. It just happened, and now we have something, and then also right now we're about to deal with the backlash of that. You know what I mean? From charting, gerrymandering, the fucking up Billboard charts. You know what I mean? To make it harder for free people who listen on free tiers. We know this. We know code words. Free. You know what I mean? That it's not weighted into the charting as much, or stuff that's on playlists that it doesn't count towards the same amount of sales. So now, and that's the part we have to be aware of, and that's the part we have to be united. You see what I'm saying? Is like, okay, now that it's proven that it's popular or there's demand for it, and that it's a real life thing, not some figment of our imagination. That now they're going to come for us. They've already come for us. It's whether or not we know they're coming for us. I'm sorry.
No, you good. When you talk about hope in terms of the artist, do you think some of that hope is now because of the artist development that's sort of possible now, and how we can kind of put these artists sort of in the spotlight, if you will? Like, what's the hope that's changed from then to now?
I can't speak on artist development. Tunji can, but I can speak on the hope part. Let me give you a story. So, this is around 2003, 2004. I was programming MTV Jams at the time, and I read Thomas Freeman's book. Christina Norman, who was president of MTV, knew that I had read his book because we had talked about it at dinner. He comes to talk to some of the higher level staff, and Christina Norman was like, Tuma, come join us. It's a senior thing, but what next? So I talked to him, and what happened, Lil Jon was popping in the South. All of a sudden was, you know what I mean, getting played. Yeah, because
No, I was talking about playlisting, but no, we'll get back.
No.
I'm saying we'll get back
I'll make
to
it
that.
short because it's actually a long story.
Yeah.
I'll make it short. So I talked to Thomas Freeman. I explained to him, your book, it's actually happening in hip-hop right now, where because of CD production, there was Southwest wholesaler, all this. All of a sudden, the South, who was looked down upon. Please don't, anyone here from the East Coast, West Coast, remember, people used to look down upon the South and call their music garbage, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened, I was telling them about all the movements that were happening. They were using independent, and they were, because of CDs, was democratizing their ability to be heard, or their ability to, Lil Jon was happening. It was right around the time Never Scared was getting played on Hot 97 and stuff like that. Which was at the time was like disruptor, like, you know what I mean? At that time, because they were playing the Sizzla Kalonji remix of Never Scared. Okay, long story. So at that time, I thought, oh, this is a democratization. The streaming services is actually the real democratization, right? Because now, if I'm at home, even if I'm in Zimbabwe, if I know his social media handle, if I know the right people, I can. If it's only the problem is there's a lot of competition and it's saturated, right? But at least the points, you know what I mean? There's not like a physical. There's not like a physical barrier. You know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? Like, you see what I'm saying? It's removed. You see what I'm saying? Maybe there's a psychological or sociological barrier, or you know what I mean? Or maybe we're talking about opportunity cost earlier today, because he has other work to do. He can't. There's 1,000 DM requests, but he has 1,000 emails.
Like you're sacrificing your attention on something. Like you gotta pick and choose.
Exactly. So maybe those barriers exist. You know what I mean? Which is an economic barrier because that's the economics of time. But what happens in productivity? But what happens is, but that at least the physical part. You see what I'm saying? And in your mind, at least I know that. And then there's so many stories that are so transparent, and so, you know what I mean? There's so many options, so many lanes have been created because of digital. Because it's not about limited retail space or limited playlist space on the radio, on Power 99. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? It's like only 50. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other lanes to come up to that space. Yeah.
That's some real shit. I mean, a great example of that is like when I was a kid, the closest I could get to the music was like to listen to the radio and call the station. You know, but whereas I feel like now, if I was a kid now, I would discover who Tuma was, or who like Carl Cherry was, or any of these other curators, and I would like DM them or like try to find their email and reach out. So it's just like you said, the barrier for entry is, I'm not gonna say that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's just a little bit lower, and that contributes to the hope thing. And then the question about artist development, I mean, there's never been, that's just ingrained in the music industry, I feel like. And there's very few success stories without artist development. And you can see that in this era. You can go back in time. I mean, one of the first artists that I worked with that really became a huge star was Kendrick Lamar. And when I met him, he was K-Dot. He was J-Rock's hype man. He had a funny looking haircut. He wore really baggy clothes, but he could rap his ass off. And he just, you know, J-Rock was the artist at the time. He was the one that had the record deal. I was working at Warner Brothers. And Kendrick, like, took his time to grow as an artist, and you got to credit his team and the TDE team and Dave Free and those guys for giving him, just letting him grow. And then, you know, at a certain point, he changed his name to his government name, and, you know, started making kind of more introspective music with depth, and he turned a corner artistically. But, you know, that was one of the first examples for me of like, wow, if somebody is great, it doesn't mean that their moment's gonna come immediately. Like sometimes it takes a little while. And you know, there's people in this crowd right now that I've seen, that I've met at the beginning of their journey, or that met me at the beginning of my journey. And, you know, you have to grow. And if you're, for me in my role at the label as like the A&R guy or whatever, it's my job to surround the artist with as many resources that can help them grow. And that's like making music, that's performing, that's just like, yo, you should meet this other artist who kind of, you know, you guys could connect or make records together. Just any, you know, it's not even just artistic development. It's also just personal development and helping people, you know, grow as humans and see things differently and think more critically about the decisions they're making for their career or the way that they make their music or whatever. I also just I feel like we should do like a quick background. I feel like we kind of did it, but like, I'm a kid that was an artist that somehow got an internship at a label, kept getting invited back, you know. Luckily, I encountered the TDE guys at the beginning of my career, which I feel like kind of gave me credibility. He's like, oh, that's the kid that runs around with Kendrick and them. And then, you know, I ended up at Interscope Records, and, you know, I didn't sign Kendrick or anything, but I was part of the story, I'll say. And that kind of gave me my little shine as a young A&R. And then things got weird at Interscope, which happens at labels. And I ended up at RCA about 3.5 years ago. And it's funny because they brought me to RCA to like be the rap guy because I was the TDE guy, but I just started signing mad R&B shit, and which goes back to the streaming thing because at the time, you know, someone that was running a label in 2015 would say like, yo, this R&B shit ain't selling, it's dead. But if you really look under the hood, what was happening was hip hop was becoming so dominant that the spots at radio, I think, were being taken by all these rap records. So R&B kind of lost its place at radio, and people, you know, the industry is like, oh, well, I guess people don't want R&B anymore. But then when streaming came in, I feel like it kind of gave that audience an ability to find those artists. And you know, like Tuma said, it was like a hidden industry. And I think once the numbers started to turn around 2014, 2015, and then really like 2016, 2017 is where it really set in. Now everyone's like, oh my God, black music is the most popular genre. And it's like, it's been that way for quite some time. It's just it wasn't necessarily getting the right platforms and the right exposure.
So how are the digital media companies and the labels sort of working together to make that a little more, in the open there for the artists?
Wait, can I just a few things that he left out. He signed Bryson Tiller. He signed SZA. He signed her. Who else? He signed somebody.
I didn't.
Yeah, you signed them. No.
I didn't sign her. I kind of inherited her.
Oh, yeah, he inherited her.
Fixed it up and
but
got
he's
it
been
right.
Developing. He's been
Developed
developing.
yeah.
Well, there's someone else. There's a few people, more big people. Like basically, he made RCA go on fire. Khalid. Oh yeah. Let's send me your location, Khalid. Yeah. So,
and I met Tuma when I was an assistant in the marketing department at Interscope. My old boss, Nikki, had worked with him when he was at MTV and BET. And she had done video promotions when she was at Jive. You guys all know this, but the whole industry is just a network of people. And that's why looking into this crowd is mad weird, because it's people that know me as like a rapper, like from like when I was in school, then people that know me as like a young executive, then there's people that like mentored me, like Khalil, then there's people that like, there's like people that I've signed in the audience. It's like, this is mad weird, y'all. So where do we go from here?
You said the partnerships between the
partnerships between the digital media companies.
Well, so I worked at Spotify until a few months ago.
Hold on, he started Rap Caviar. He made Spotify hot.
No.
He did that.
Well, but the thing is this, but there was a turning point, and I was there there was a lot of distrust when we first started. And I remember witnessing the turning point. A guy named Troy Carter joined he was an investor. Troy was an early investor in Spotify. And Troy decided, hey, let me come and work with you guys on the inside help, because there was a big distrust with the music community and a lot of lack of understanding in terms of how to optimize the platform. And that's when your question really got kind of defined in terms of the correct answer. Was instead of viewing each other as challenges or adversaries, or you know what I mean, or having a hostile kind of approach, you know what I mean, that it was all about negotiations, that you only check in with the labels when it's time to re-up the deals, or you know what I mean, etc. Troy, he came in and took a very, I call them the State Department, right? And so it was almost like having embassies in every country and engaging and doing things to help advance, whether it be the information, the knowledge, whether it be actual, sometimes even monetary support, where you do billboards for artists and you talk to Atlantic and say, hey, look, we're going to give Cardi B her Rap Caviar cover, that we're going to do a billboard in Times Square, and then Atlantic will be like, oh, that means if there's going to be already a billboard in Times Square with her on the Rap Caviar cover, then we don't have to spend money on the billboard and Rap Caviar cover. That money can go elsewhere, you know what I mean? Yeah. In terms of her budget, you see what I'm saying? So that kind of partnership, that kind of communication, so that kind of, hey, look, heads up, your artist that may not be a priority is doing well on the platform, you know what I mean? And
so that leads me to my next sort of question.
Okay.
If you just,
that's fine.
On the back burner, but what does it take for an artist to get playlisted or noticed to get playlisted like that? You mentioned budget. Is that a thing?
No.
Not marketing, but in terms of
the playlist, the platforms pay money out. They're not, no, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's not the other way around. You know what I mean? It wasn't next. So that's for that to be clear.
No, for sure.
No. So basically, the cool thing about a lot of these platforms is you can see how much artists are being searched for. You can see how organic it is. You see how much something's being searched for. If someone is discovering a song on your playlist and they're adding it to their own playlist, because once it lives on, this is the deal. This is the trick. This is what people don't understand. And even Rap Caviar, the influence did not come from the actual listening. It was from people cherry picking and putting on their own playlists. Yeah, because we're in that playlist, music programming, music curation, what we do, everybody in this room does, is now democratized. It's almost like photography and Instagram. Everyone's a photographer now. You know what I mean? I'm a photographer. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a real photographer, but I have a real camera. But what happens is this, so people put on their own playlist, and on their own playlist, that's where you really see, that's where the shelf life of a song really exists. That's when the evangelism.
These are thousands and
Yeah,
thousands
that's,
of
that's where
playlists.
the
and, like,
ownership. That's where people feel like they own a song. You know, I thought.
my playlist.
Yeah, exactly. Like, whose playlist is this at a cookout or at a slumber party? Like, well, it's mine. I put it together. But no, you cherry picked from all these different. You know what I mean? Playlists. You know, because that's what they do.
Discover that track. And,
The data exists. That's what you did. We can see that you know. So what happens is this: it's that type of information that is now available. You know what I mean? You can track. You can actually. Before it was professors who would do professors and A&Rs who were studying geographic music diffusion. You know what I mean? Like how. A record starts it was broken in Shreveport, then it got to start playing it in Atlanta strip clubs, and then all of a sudden Jacksonville and Montgomery and Chattanooga were fucking with it. Now it's hot in Charlotte. You know what I mean? Like, you see what I'm saying? There was only a handful of us who even paid attention to how records were growing and breaking, etc. Now it's all there. It's all there, like literally at the people who have access to that data at their fingertips, and some
almost instantaneously as well, though, because some of these
in
tracks
real
are so
life.
fresh. Yeah.
Ask
and the
ask
DJs
Tunji.
are almost breaking these records
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, well, that's still happening, and sometimes you have to figure out whether it's coming from, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, where is it coming from? Yeah, where's it coming from? You know, and that's why I like the story of the Big Von and Boot Up. Yeah, I love hearing that story. You know what I mean? Like that was in real. Yeah, Big Von, he broke.
He
Boot
went
Up.
to a party.
He went to a party.
They were playing the record, and he didn't know what it was. And all the girls at the party were singing the song.
And a grown man did a cartwheel.
And he Shazammed
And
it, and
he,
then he was like,
Big
oh.
Von.
and he texted DJ Mustard, and he was like, "Yo, you got a hit here." You know
But
what
I think
Yeah.
again, something else.
He started playing it.
I think something that people don't talk about with that story though is, goes back to the artist development question, because it's like when I heard that story, I was like, how did all these girls in the Bay know about LMA? Like, why were they fucking
1 year
with
later.
her? And then I did some thinking, and I was like, oh, it's because she went on tour with Kehlani, who's like huge in the Bay, and she did 2 tours with her. And again, that goes back to artist development. And, the audience was prepared for the artist when the artist had the moment, because the artist, had done the legwork to get that moment. And also just to go back to the question about how do you get on a playlist, sometimes it's just like the people who are in these positions, not everybody, but the majority of them are actually fans who really came up in this game. Like, I've really known Tuma when he was at BT and MTV. Like, my friend Carl, who's now at Spotify, was a writer at Double XL, and
SOHH before that?
and he was at SOHH before that, and is a real fan. So sometimes it's as simple as like they hear the record early and they just fall in love with it, and like, yo, I want to get behind this. I love this. Similar to like radio programmers or whatever. And one good example of that is like her, who, again, this is another artist development story. She was signed to RCA when she was 14 years old. She's been signed for like 6-7 years. And she put out a couple songs, and they did okay, and, under her real name, Gabby Wilson. And, she was kind of just like in the background making records. I showed up. We put out Bryson Tiller's album. It did really well. And they were like, oh, we have this other artist who's kind of similar to Bryson, but more from a female perspective. Like, what do you think about this? And I heard the records. I was like, this is fucking fire. Like, what are we doing with this? They're like, oh, it's little Gabby. She's been signed for a while. We don't really know what to do with her. And, I just started playing it for all my friends. Carl, who was at Apple Music at the time, fell in love with it. And he was like, yo, as soon as this comes out, I'm playlisting it. Like, let me fuck with this. Because he just believed in it. And, now she's,
Is that multiple playlists for? Is it just?
I mean, I don't remember. I think he put
Putting
it in
in the
like
right
Breaking
spaces.
R&B and
for sure.
and the A-list R&B playlist and stuff like that.
And all these streaming services have like architecture or taxonomy, whatever you want to call it, where they have feeder playlists, satellite playlists, flagship playlists. You know what I mean? So I was telling Julio when I was doing Rap Caviar, I did 40 playlists. That's why I was like so fucking busy, like, you know what I mean? And I'll be at night. I like the only because I was in meetings and dealing with phone calls and emails during the day. And at night I would go do a playlist, or go update a playlist, or even just sometimes just tweak it or massage it, right?
I remember talking, like having conversations with you, and you're like, "Oh shit, my playlist is due in an hour. I gotta go. I gotta finish this shit."
Yeah, because it's real. And what happens is this: is what I was telling Julio. All people saw was the cooking show where you see them putting the food in the oven, and then you see
The
them putting it in
time-lapse.
the oven. Yeah, exactly. But you don't see the whole kneading and you know what I mean, and marinating and you know what I mean, and sprinkling and you know and all that stuff and the cutting up and you don't see sort of thing. And those other playlists were that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's all I saw. You know what I mean? I didn't know about all the other stuff. You know what I mean? And it didn't come out like Martha Stewart level. You know?
That's real. Do we have any questions in the audience?
This question is kind of for you, Tunch. I think the thing you're talking about with artist development, I just wonder how the pace of an artist like Khalid, for example, who goes viral on a single before you got involved, how that accelerates the pace, because you're talking about surrounding him with people that he needs for his personal development, his professional development, but that timeline must be super advanced, knowing that, like, damn, this thing's already leaving the station and we need to, like, develop this into a full thing, but there are factors out there you can't control, like there's demand and there's all these things that are changing in his personal life. Like, how do you sort of navigate the traditional artist development trajectory in a world where things can just start going before you even, are involved?
That's a really good question. The first thing I'll say is there's no more traditional. There's no more set rules. Everything is different at this point, and every artist's story is different, And also, at what point you engage the artist in their story, But with Khalid specifically, I think part of the reason why it worked was because, he was only 18, 19, but he was such a mature kid. And I think that's because he was like a military kid that just grew up in a lot of different places and always had to start over, always had to start fresh in his life. So he was one of those people that every time we took him around to meet people or he would be put in a new social situation, people would fall in love with him, and he was able to really articulate his story very well. And I think the primary goal of artist development is not only to make the artist a stronger artist and to make them better at what they do, but to just build culture around the story and to add culture to the story. So, I'm just going to talk about him specifically, but, he's a kid kind of from El Paso, Texas, although he's really from everywhere, but that's kind of where he got discovered. So it was really about telling that story, and he had this record location that was starting to build, and he had 3 or 4 other songs that he'd put on his SoundCloud only. So we were like, okay, well, let's take these records and put them onto the bigger DSPs, digital service providers, and put them on Spotify, Apple, everywhere. YouTube, shout out to YouTube.
Hey.
And basically our plan was like, we're just gonna like use these older records that are kind of like his demos to stall people while we create this album and like run him around and make sure he meets everybody. And I remember I wanted to take him to London to record, and they were like, no, it's too early. Or rather, I wanted to take him to London to meet a bunch of people and do like a marketing trip and like meet like Spotify and Apple and all these people out there. And they were like, nah, it's too early. So I was like, bet, we're gonna go record in London and just like record. And we went and did a few sessions, but we also took those meetings. But in that time when we were releasing these older records, they started to move on these DSPs. So we were like, shit, we should probably put these on his album that we're making too. So we made a bunch of new songs, took the old songs, dusted them off. The whole time we were really focusing on Location as like the primary single. We did a video for it. We did a short run of shows for him. We called the Location Tour. I remember Xavier was at the first show in Chicago. And it's every plan is tailored specifically to that artist and to that moment in time. So if it had been anybody else, it might not have worked, or if it had been any other point. If I had discovered him 6 months later, it might not have worked. But I think it's really about being super adaptable and reading the tea leaves and looking around at everything that's happening. And like I said, every artist is different. I don't want to blast you, but Xavier Omar is the latest artist that I've signed, and we're about to get really into his project. And shout out to Xavier. And he's obviously he's in a different point in his career than where Khalid was. So it's like, you know, he's never shot a video for one of his songs. So it's like, oh, let's shoot a great video for some of this stuff. And like, how do we add to the story? Because he's already done so much. It's like, how do we add and make this into a fuller thing? So basically, like, there is no set answer. The only answer is that there is no answer. And that everybody deserves their own plan and their own kind of like setup.
Wait, can I tell an artist development story personalized to this room? Because Jazzy Jeff is here. I heard the story, and I think it was Barry Weiss who told us the story. I don't know if it was an interview, it was a dinner, I don't know where, but it was a Jay-Z. Jay-Z, so Barry Weiss was saying that I think you guys, you and Fresh Prince recorded in UK, Zomba Recording Studios. He was saying Jay-Z told, I don't know where I heard this, but he said that when he was running around with Jazz, when they did Hawaiian Sophie, they recorded in the same place. Barry Weiss and them sent them to, they were on Jive or Zomba or whatever, and they sent them to they want him to be you guys, so they sent them to London. They sent him to London to get whatever mojo you got in London doing He's the DJ and I'm the Rapper or I don't know if that was the album. But what happens is, and that's what the whole Hawaiian Sophie formula, and Jay-Z said that was the time he was learning the game, right? He was learning the game. He was soaking up all these vibes from London. He told Barry Weiss this story, like, because they were basically they wanted to be you guys. And yeah, so that's artist development, because Jay-Z, we all know, we all watched his, most of us are old enough to remember his come up, you know what I mean? It took years. That was like 89, 88, 89. Yeah, exactly. Reasonable, that was like 96. You see what I'm saying? And then something else, I just want to get this off my chest more so than anything else, is a couple weeks ago, or months ago, we had two rappers who passed away, who were killed, and on the same day, right? And I talked to somebody who had a conversation with one of them. You could figure out which one, but that one of them had just bought a new car, and somebody who introduced that artist to me, but was not involved in our career, was like, "Hey, you shouldn't be riding this car in this particular town. You know what I mean? Save that for when you're in Atlanta or LA thing, because in that town, people can know where you are too easy. You know what I mean? Well, actually, oh man, what? But yeah, you guys can figure out which one. It's not the famous one, right? It's the lesser famous one. Yeah. So what happens is this: when I heard about that conversation that happened like 2 days before, and then he just got signed and all that stuff, and I was like thinking, wait, artist development can also be like a life thing. You know what I mean? With the way the NBA, this is hypothetical. I'm just being theoretical. Like the way the NBA bring in rookies and say, hey, you need to manage your money. This is a scammer, or this is a groupie. You know what I mean? This is a mentor for you to, while you're coming up in your rookie year. They have these like boot camps and processes.
Becomes like life development.
Yeah, it's life development as well.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So they're building like citizens. I used to have a principal in Zimbabwe who used to tell us like, hey, we're not human doings. It's not what we do. It's who you are. We're human beings. It's who you are. A good citizen, a good neighbor, a good friend, a good cousin, a good, you know what I mean? A coworker, etc. So it says. So I was like, when I heard that about that conversation, and I'm not saying that because I always used to get bothered whenever I used to hear of someone like a Chinks or Doe B, people who are on the cusp, and then something like this happens, you know, and I used to always bother. Then I said, theoretically, what if, just because I'm touched by the magic of this, because I'm a big proponent in music curation being recognized as an art form, right? Commercial art, I do it as a commercial art, right? But there's people here who do it. It's high art. It's art. It's, you know what I mean? And then you go get paid, and you know what I mean, for a gig or whatever. And then at that point, you're being patronized, and whoever the audience is who you're doing it for. But what happens is this. So I'm just putting up an idea out into the universe about the artist development being formalized or institutionalized, and say, hey, this institution. Maybe you guys aren't even on the same labels, but all of you guys, like the people meet at the XXL freshman photo shoot. We used to see people meet for the first time. I was there the first time Lil Wayne and Tyga met. I was right there. with Travi and Tyga went up to say hi to Lil Wayne at the Fall Out Boy suite in the VMA, the VMAs. VMAs, people used to meet all the time. I was like, what if this was institutionalized? Maybe we would save lives. You know what I mean? Where you're getting put onto game from your peers, and your mentors have access to everyone right there to say, yo, you know what? You shouldn't be going to this neighborhood anymore because now people know you have money or you have that big blue car. You know what I mean? And, you know, that's all.
That's the real thing.
I think you have some more questions.
Yeah,
out
let's
here.
get some more questions.
Hey guys, I just wanted to get your perspective on the relevance of DJing in 2018, considering like the democratization of playlists. And I know for me, from a DJ's perspective, I feel a tremendous pressure in the club to play familiarity versus, you know, the patrons coming to discover new music. And it's been even worse of a problem since streaming popped off, where like the kids that come to the club, they want to hear the thing they've been streaming all week versus coming to the club to hear you drop something new. At least that's the pressure I feel from the majority of the club goers. Not all of them, but I just want to know what your ideas of the relevance of the DJ now are.
Well, the relevance, the DJ is very relevant, but there has to be an adaptation, right? Radio was the biggest driver of familiarity for a long time, so you kind of knew. So I had a boss, I'm going to drop a gem, right? And every single person in this knows this gem. However, this boss that I had at BET put it in words, and it always guided. It was kind of a GPS of sorts. You know what I mean? The thing. And he told me the 4 pillars of music programming was familiarity, recognition, and I'll differentiate what the difference between recognition and familiarity. Burn, right? Fatigue, and repetition. And he's like, if you pay attention to those 4 things, you're good for life. And now I'm good for life. And hopefully that you're also all good for life too. But you all know this, right? The familiarity is the most important one. And recognition is basically if this was a music video outlet, and is if people know who that is. They know Snoop Dogg's voice, or they know that ad lib, or et cetera. So they recognize it. So immediately your guards are dropped. You know what I mean? Like you're not music shamed. Because what happens is, especially with a lot of people in this room are high information, high consumption when it comes to music, we don't mind music shaming people, right? We're like, oh, you're not up on this? Oh, you're whack. Fuck you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're the real music heads. You see what I'm saying? That's not cool. That's not cool at all. Because the only reason, my dad's a teacher. So my dad, my whole life, taught me if somebody doesn't know something, you transfer that knowledge, and that's where the generation transfer. That's what's going on right now with this generation gap. We don't have any generation transfer because everyone's telling you you're a fucking mumble rapper, you're ruining this shit, rather than like, hey, you know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? So you don't music shame. And that's the problem. So what's happening is this. So okay, familiar recognition, burn, paying attention when something's burning out. It's a time to put it away. Maybe come back later. You know what I mean? Repetition is like how you were asking about. How many playlists? You see what I'm saying? That's how always for us it was rotation. You know what I mean? At the linear channels it was heavy rotation, medium rotation, light rotation, mixtape. You see what I'm saying? Mix show, what they call mix show at radio. So what happens is this. So it's managing that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I have this in every playlist. Okay, I need to slow down. You know what I mean? It's burning out, etc. You see what I'm saying? And that's everyone here does that. It's just this boss was lucky. He took a liking to me, so he mentored me and he taught me, right? So I was lucky to have these in words so to inform my decisions at every point, at every song, at every job I've had, at every, you see what I'm saying? Catch what I'm saying? So familiarity is important, and there is a responsibility to the DJ to adapt. Whatever the dominant thing is right now is going to change, is to use that as a gauge. So as much as I may hate radio and detest radio, I still have to respect the dominance and the power that it has on the audience that I want to reach or I want to connect with as a kind of GPS purposes, just to know this is my standard or this is what the high, you know what I mean? Because that's how you break records. Is nestling those the records that you fuck with in between those records. Yeah. That's how you break records. We all know that. Everyone in this room knows that. right? So that's life. It's life.
I think that's just
you know
part
what I
of
mean?
getting older, too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
it comes with it. You know what I mean? And you can still be selective with the records that you're familiar with. You don't have to play Kiki Do You Love Me like every 5 seconds. You know what I mean? You still have the power to say in the discretion when you're gonna play that record or when you're gonna fuck with that record, or if you know what I mean, or if you only want to play 15 seconds of that record and you're gonna use it to get into the Before I Let Go. You know what I mean? Shit, you know? Yeah, you know what I mean?
Lord Finesse.
My goal is, I'm hearing his question, I'm hearing your response. When you from a generation where the DJ broke the records, it's different. Now you telling him to break a record, he has to pull it off a playlist.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying use the playlist as a reference in terms of gauging familiarity, right? And by the way, that's what an adaptation is. That's it, you know what I mean? Things change. This now we're talking power. Who has the power right now, right?
But-
Whoa. So if down south is popping and you're not from down south and you're not fucking with down south records, but everyone wants to hear down south records, if you don't adapt, if you don't think, in the academics they call it publish or perish.
It's not that.
So it's yeah.
But these things were taken from the street, they were taken from the fans, they were taken from a DJ organically liking something versus you having to play something because it's popular. So it's taste making. I hear what you're saying, that you have to be in tune with what's out there. But if what's out there is being controlled by the dollars, where's the organic thing from the DJ of selecting something he really enjoys versus something that's being created by dollars?
No, wait, hold on a second. First of all, it's an assumption that it's only dollars. That's thing. What I'm saying to you is to use. This is what I'm saying. That's why I'm talking about the nestling, or you know what I mean, of records, is to use that, and you can be selective in which ones you respect, and then that way think. Well, and also what we're talking about is really like a chicken and egg thing. You see what I'm saying?
I can't speak for down south, right?
No, I was just using that as an
No,
example.
I can speak for New York.
Okay.
And when I listened to the radio in New York, when it started off in the 90s, it was a great variety of music. So you had your underground, you had your pop, you had a variety of everything. Now one thing is being forced down your throat. And not once an hour, but maybe 10 times an hour. So how can something be broken, a new record, if it's not being played?
It's not gonna break on the radio. It's gonna break on the internet, and then it's gonna graduate.
Okay, I get it.
Well,
Because
you know,
some of the playlists is demanded by the street.
Yeah,
Okay,
but wait,
I get it.
I'm making this up as I go along. But this is something I've talked about. Literally, I'm making this up right now. Because you have a room here of like-minded, passionate music curators. It's something that I've noticed on streaming networks is we don't have like a Black Twitter or a Beehive or Occupy Wall Street or hackers have Anonymous. You know what I mean? These collectives, these invisible, they all work together. You see what I'm saying? All thing is if a certain aesthetic, if you're passionate about preserving or growing a specific aesthetic, if Royce da 5'9" comes out with this amazing album, right, then driving the charge of invisible network, like the Beehive do, you know what I mean? If you fuck with Beyonce, they're coming for you. They're gonna put bees in your comments on social media, etc. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? No, this is it. And it could become from Lord Finesse. You know what I mean? We call them the finessers, right? Is like, hey, oh, you know what? We got to make this shit hot. Everybody. I used to see Ross and them do it on early Twitter, like where I would get a DM from Ross or Khaled, like, can you retweet this? Can you retweet this? Like, and you knew it wasn't coming from Ross. You knew it was coming from their social media person. But they knew that power of that unity. See what I'm saying? So if that means something so much to us, then creating that like this right here, you know what I mean, is creating some kind of unison. And maybe that's a problem with New York. There's no united New York force. You know what I mean? That banner, that flag is not strong enough for the 5 boroughs, you know what I mean, to say, hey, we need to, you know what I mean?
Champion
go hard.
this record.
Champion this,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
We, by any means necessary, make sure A Boogie is the top of this, or whatever. You know what I mean?
I also think there's just so many more players now. There's so many more people trying to get in, you know, than I think at the beginning where it was like a handful of great artists or great crews. Now you have 20,000 people trying to get the same spot. So I think it's just a little bit different, and like, you know, the way to get to the spot has changed over time, you know. So I think it's our job to adapt to that. It's the fans' job to adapt to that, and it's the artist's job to adapt to that.
And
You know?
it's
I think we all owe it to each other to
and-
keep the ecosystem healthy.
And it's very possible that New York had an artificial competitive advantage to begin with. And when it was time to compete on a level playing field, when it didn't matter if you could get your demo to an A&R who was your cousin's classmate at PS 107, you know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? That disappeared, and now, you know what I mean? Like, you know? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, now it's a level playing
We're
field.
gonna take one more question. Also, clearly these guys are sticking around. There's gonna be a lot of breakout conversations that are gonna be just like this, but better. So we're gonna have one more question, and then we're gonna call it for the night.
Thanks. So there is so much music right now, like more than ever before, and everyone's making it. So I just want to know, I see a lot of artists now doing this kind of throwing everything at the wall and making sure something works, and collabs and features, and, you know, like big people have 800 projects going on and albums with 20 tracks, like 3 albums with 20 tracks. In your perspective as A&R, is that method good? Like just keep going and keep putting stuff out till something sticks, or just be really flexible?
I think, like I said earlier, like everybody's different and everyone has their own formula. I think what's most important is just to, without sounding cliche and corny, like stay true to what's important to that artist. And you know, everybody has a different plan for making it. You know, Kendrick Lamar I saw him make 5 mixtapes and no one cared. You know what I mean? And I saw Khalid make 1 song and he blew up. So I feel like the strategy isn't quite as important as the actual work and the way that you're connecting and putting that music out to the fans, and also what you're doing around the music. You know, like it's a combination of like the music, the conversation that's happening with your fans, and like the visual brand that you're building around the music that kind of crystallizes what the music sounds like and what it feels like and looks like. I feel like that's sort of the closest thing to a formula that you have these days. But I mean, now you have people that are just trying to sort of game the system and break records and put out mad shit and put out long albums and, you know, simply just for the accolades and stuff like that. That's not necessarily what I'm interested in. I'm more so just like, I'm still a fan. Like, I'm still a nerdy fan that's sitting at home listening to everything with 30 tabs open on SoundCloud, just like, I'm not going to bed until I check all this shit out. So for me personally, I can only speak on my personal experience. I've always been drawn to artists that are telling a really authentic story with depth and introspection and obviously talent, and that are doing things a little bit differently. And, you know, I hate to keep talking about the same thing, but I think because I came in with artists that were doing that, it sort of has become my brand as an A&R. So, you know, whereas a lot of guys just got to chase whatever's popping, I've been able to kind of create this little corner of like, oh, he fucks with like the cool left to center black artists. Like, okay, that's what he does. And I really take it, you know, very seriously and see it as a responsibility, not only to this new generation of artists, but also to the industry to kind of like translate that language back and forth, because, you know, there aren't a lot of people that came up from like the underground rap world into the music industry like me. So yeah, I mean, that's just my story. But I think every artist kind of has to figure out their way to be their best selves without sacrificing what's important about their art. You know. Hope that was a good answer.
Tuma, Tunji, give it up, y'all. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, guys.